So I'm not just rambling to myself like last time. I have a little checklist of things I'm going to actually say and talk about. So it's been a while since I've been able to actually get the willpower to actually do a video coverage of what I've been doing, because I've been stuck on animations for the most part, and eventually I broke down just to get past my stuck point and got a few animation packs during the Black Friday sale, just to get me past where I need to go so I can work on some other mechanics and game stuff. So far, like, the major thing that I've changed to the actual toolkit to help my game better in general is I found better ways to do all the little map scans that I have up here. I found better ways to get enemy information just through the actual character. So I'm removed a lot of stuff from ticks, a lot of things that do the horrible get all actors of class, even things that I use to just get little quick multicast traces, and that got me all the way back from, I think, about 30 frames per second, or 30, 32, maybe 29, back up to 60 frames per second. That made me incredibly happy in general. Some other things that I've added here as well is the ability to go stealth. I showed that last time, but I've also, using the Chameleon plugin, added the ability to do scans, so I can see where enemies are. They fade after a while. But if I'm trying to sneak up on an enemy to be able to get an advantage, I can see where they are. Like if I was in this cave right here, not cave, whatever this would be, ventilation system or whatever, I can scan, see where my enemies are, be able to try to sneak around to get a battle advantage on them if I wanted to, or I could just run up to them if I wanted to. Trying to stay up to my checklist to make sure I'm not rambling. One thing I've added was field actions. It was one thing that I appreciated a lot from games like Wild Arms and things like that, where characters actually had certain abilities in the actual field when you're moving around. So that way you build a system of characters that, switching between characters actually does something of an advantage in the game, and that's one thing I really appreciate, and I wanted to take in usage in my game. So this character right here, this is not the main character, but the I guess you can say cliche side character, where she has the ability to, I guess I call it step blink. It's pretty much a quick dash that she can do to get away or close the gap between you and the enemy. You can actually like quick step into a actual enemy fight, but you can also use it while sneaking, and it's a quick way to dash past enemies or dash into enemies to where you don't make any sound while doing this, which helps give you a field advantage when you're trying to get into an ambush battle, which I'm about to try right now. He's not turned around. I wonder if I can... Nope. Oh, that's too far. I still gotta tweak that because it's going a little bit too far, further than I expected. Way further than I expected for me to travel with this ability. Even with animation tweaks, for some reason when I actually activate the montage, it doesn't always work the way it's supposed to. So now I should be able to dash right into him and get an ambush. And since I started on this side, I know the ambush is working. See if I can lock on. So one thing I've been able to do with the battle system, the way I had, I guess, the crazy button smashing before for the battle system wasn't really quite working the way I needed it to work. That's when I started reading up on input buffers and how they work. And now I understand how they work, the battle feels a lot better. Plus, it gives me the ability to do combos the way I wanted to do. I'm not really over the edge with trying to do a combo, but at least I have something that feels a lot better and looks a little bit more smoother. So I have light attacks. And then I have heavy attacks. Well, actually, I did that backwards. This is the light attack. And this is heavy attacks. And I can control what direction I want to go in. I have checks in here to where I can do certain moves in certain directions if I wanted to. Right now I have everything as a soft lock, so if I unlock, if I want to attack a character, it will check to see what directions I'm facing. If I'm moving the actual analog stick, and it'll use that direction that I'm trying to force myself into to try to see if I can get a soft lock in that general direction. But if I'm not holding any kind of direction, as long as the character is near, it'll soft lock to the nearest character. And even if I'm locked onto the enemy, I can still lock away. Well, I can break lock by holding the different direction of where I want to attack. So that way if I'm locked on somebody, I can still stop someone else that's trying to hit me from the side or something like that. I must have completely damaged something from my actual attack inputs, because it doesn't seem like it's always hitting the enemy now. But oh well, at least I've gotten further than I've gotten before. And I know I changed something with the battle calculation now that I added defending, which this doesn't really look like much right now, but I'm defending. And I'm supposed to take less damage. And I can also, how can I explain this? When I'm defending, I can also use her quick step ability to dodge out the way and get a lot of I'm not good at words today. I can get a lot of distance away or towards an enemy based on what kind of attack they're doing. So she's good at dodging in general. Other characters won't be able to do this. They'll be able to do a small dodge, but she's the only one, at least in battle, that has the ability to do a quick dash and cover so much distance. And right now, I don't know if you've seen that much in the bottom corner, but every time I attack, I'm taking away a little bit of stamina, and I'm trying to work it out to see how much stamina I can balance with the attacks that I'm doing. So that way, part of the mechanics will be balancing attacks, heavy attacks, quick attacks to be able to stagger enemies, using heavier attacks to be able to, which are slower, or will be probably slower than this, to be able to get some ability to get damage in, but not use stamina as much. But it also means that you're more prone and open to be able to be staggered by an enemy's attack. But to, I guess, kind of stagger lock an enemy target that you're fighting against, you can use the quick light attacks. But again, that will use your stamina faster, and the only way to get stamina back is to wait. But if you're defending, you get it a lot more. But I also I plan on having shield breaks for defending people, and lovely animate and lovely crashes to my engine when I try to do stuff. That is That's weird. It didn't crash. It broke. It didn't crash. Huh. But I lost what I was saying. But oh yeah, this is just things I'm trying out with my battle system, trying to make sure that I can add some kind of decent mechanics in here for making the battle enjoyable. There's going to be more than that, but this is just the basic what I have right now. And again, I don't know if I can show this really easily, but I can switch between the heavy attacks and the light attacks because of the input buffer. Before, I wasn't able to do this because however I was doing the notifications and trying to check see if the button was pressed at the time, it just did not work fluidly. And actually playing with this helped a lot. One thing that I can show as well is I was finally able to make an animation blueprint modular. So that way I don't have to create an animation blueprint over and over again for another character. I can actually parent that to a main animation graph that has everything in it, but when you actually go and look at the animations, it's dynamically getting your animation for that class from my class object that originally had nothing in it, but now it has the character specific or class specific animations. So that way I can create a motion setup and just quickly apply it to other characters without having to worry about redoing things, copying code, or duplicating the animation blueprint and having to manually go in and replace every single animation. It also helps me switch things out a little bit better. So if I go over here to my character that I was just playing with, if I look at her class configuration, I have all her animations. So I have an idle animation now as well as an idle rest, a walk animation blend space, the sneaks, the sneak at rest, forward sneak animation, start jump, all this other general stuff, swimming. I don't have that implemented yet, but I'm going to. But it's just pretty much a general layout of everything that is needed for a character's class. And even down here inside of the class move list, I added the ability to be able to make a move list. So right now I only really have two, which is the high and low attacks. And in here I bind them to a certain input type, which just bottom face, which is X, and the other one is circle. So that way, as I'm pretty much going through the input buffer and bashing these buttons left and right, back and forth, trying to make my own little combos or get different battle advantages depending on what tier of attack I'm in, I can switch between these attacks and link them together with the other ones based on the current tier of attack I'm in. And right now I only have 4 tiers of attack, so I can go back and forth between the light and heavy attacks to blend them together. One thing I've also done with this is inside a given attack, I've made C++ linkages for notifications. So all of these right here are C++ base that I implement into Blueprint before I actually use them. And what this gives me the ability to do is just, for instance, for the move forward, this is a in-place animation, but what I've done is for this state, I can match up the forward movement of the actual feet and apply a forward motion to the animation without having to use the root motion. And the reason I've done this is so that I can control certain leaps forward and things like that that I want to tweak. So if, for instance, if I go to the heavy attack, so inside the heavy attack, that's a giant lunge forward right here at the beginning of the animation. And I've been able to use this to actually tweak how far forward I actually want the lunge to be during this animation. And if I was using root animation, I would pretty much be locked with that and have to keep going back and forth between the root animation and the authorizing software to be able to change this animation over and over again. But with this, since I can actually control the forward movement here, I can actually set this to a stronger power. So if I select this over here and I look at my parameters, I have forward power to 15. So that's a big giant thrust forward. And it should activate this for every frame that it goes through in the animation. So that way I can slice it up and divvy out the power of this actual jump thrust to move my character further or closer, depending on how much of a gap closer I want them to do with this move. And that and in fact, the previous move to this does a pretty strong knockback to their move. So if I look at this previous one, this move right here does a pretty strong knockback. And once I do that knockback, I can use the next closing move to jump closer to the enemies that the enemies in the direction I want to go, and use that last attack to close the gap and attack the enemies that I just pushed back. So if for some reason I push back too far or I want to push enemies back more, I can come in here and play with the move forward animation as well as the information inside of my hit to be able to do more effects in the battle and be able to control more things. So like right now I have this hit that happens at frame 22, I guess. If I go here, I can say that I want the attack to be a cone based attack. I want to make sure that the damaging weapon is my main attack weapon, which I have in my hand. I want to make sure that the damage is physical. Preview I haven't set up yet, but that's going to be for special animations where an enemy is charging. And I want to show their general, I want to show like a decal with their general hit area or damage area. So it's like if you're playing like kind of like you see in MMOs where an enemy is about to do a charged cone attack and you can see the area of damage on the ground for a momentary amount of time before the attack goes off. That's what that's going to be for, but I haven't implemented that yet. I have configurable hit radius and cone radius, so this is going to hit everything within a 300 radius of it, and it's going to hit everything within 300 degrees of the character. And I can control that to make it a smaller cone or a wider radius, however I want to try to tweak that and play around with the settings. Along with that, I can increase the damage modification for this for the attack. So like if I have for instance, in my attack stream going from like the first hit to the fourth hit, I actually increase the damage of those hits as you go up the combo chain to be able to give you a benefit of the combo. And also some moves do a pushback effect that I talked before, and you can control how much of a pushback you actually want to do on your enemies. So that way it just gives you more flexibility on whatever you're trying to do. So right here, to break this whole thing down in general, I have a track right here on the most top track. I have the ability to move the character forward and then move it again because there's another footstep here, which this one is a higher push forward. than this step. I have the hit cone to be able to apply any kind of hit range or hit effect that I want to do. And if I can show this real quick, I have a hit line and a hit cone right now, which is just pretty much a different way of calculating how many enemies I'm about to hit with this this move set. I also have the combo range check, which once we enter this area for the combo range, that is where I use the input buffer to check to see whether I have something stored in the buffer, and if there is, that means that I should be moving on to the next attack in the combo list based on, you know, whatever's stacked in the input buffer. Which, before, me trying to check the my actual current press left me missing the small little window that I had to be able to continue a combo correctly, and the input buffer just completely removed all that complications that I was trying to do and having with the actual combo setup. So like I said before, this allows me to check to see if I can go to the next combo or not, or which combo that I would be going to. And then if I get to combo end, that actually just, it allows me to, one, start over my combo set again. It allows me to clear the input buffer because it's no longer needed and start anew. And it also does something else that I can't think of right now. But and this is just a trail. This is where I just set up my weapon trails. And actually what I'm using right now is, I'm not actually using a weapon bone per se to do the trail. I'm actually using just two nodes that I have attached to the bone. If I can find it. There we go. So here's my R weapon, which is just a socket. And then with that, I have two other sockets added to that. That will be the start and end of my trail. So that way I can change my weapon and not have to worry about the trails coming from the actual weapon. I can just have it there, and that gives me a general range on how long I want my weapons to be. That could be a limitation, depends on how you want to set things up, but for me right now, it's working pretty well. I might move it into bone with the weapon, like probably with my other character that has actual fist and another skeleton for the weapon, so I may have to move that over to there. But for right now, for the general test, it's working pretty well for me. Especially this move forward, I'm just in love with it because it just gives me all the abilities, and it solves a lot of problems of what I was trying to figure out a long time ago with battling between using in-place animation and motion. Like for instance, like one of the major things that I had an issue with was trying to do a dodge. So like right now, this is my dodge, and with this dodge, throughout the whole movement of this dodge, I can control how far I want the dodge to push me forward as the animation plays. And that just gives me a quick ability to be able to change how far forward I'm moving and things like that without, like, with the smallest smallest cycle of iterations as possible. That's the only thing I can think of. Hopefully I'm using the English words in a correct way. Trying to think of anything else I want to show off, because even with the combos, like with my move list, so I have light and heavy attacks, and I'm also going to have a finisher based on what tier you have, that whatever tier you're currently at for your attacks. And in here for the input list, I can actually set the bottom face and the right face. If they're pressed at the same time, then it's going to execute an animation or a skill that I have set in here. So that way, if I come in here and say, hey, when I hit both of these buttons, if I'm within this tier, I want to use skill 142 or whatever I have in my database for skills, it can look up that skill ID and execute it. And when I say look up, these are things that's already brought into RAM and stored already. The only thing I need to do is look up in my skill table that ID so I can get the animation that specific skill will use. And for any reason, if I want to override that actual animation of that skill, I can just put an animation in here that would do the same thing as that skill. But since I want to make sure that I can have some flexibility or some cross skills depending on the different players and classes, I can still use this skill ID and special ID to be able to apply those cross skills. And also, one thing I wanted to do as well is I want to have the ability for the player to be able to customize what skill at what tier they want to assign to these slots for specials. So one thing I'm going to do is this can be an empty slot allotted, and then in the menu they can apply whatever skill at what level they want. And one thing I'm thinking of doing is at a certain tier, it will either increase the potency, increase the accuracy, or increase the crit rate of that skill. So that way you can decide what benefits you want at what tier for a certain ability. So it's just something that I'm playing around with, trying to give more control to the player while still having fun with like the little tweaks and nuances that I'm trying to add to the system. And again, like with this modular system, I have an animation blueprint that is just for this specific character type. And the only thing it is just parented to the RPG class, where the RPG class will use this general animation tree to be able to go to these different states based on what you're doing. And I only have to program this once and only once. So that way I have my walk state, my sneak state, attack, and then the only thing I haven't implemented is swimming and mounting. Crawling, I'm not sure if I'm going to do. I misspelled that, but I suck at spelling in general. When I get there, I'll be able to add that and be able to test it. But for right now, I just have the general sneak state, walk state, and attack state. And each of them have their own little animation tree. This null in here is just to make sure that we will stay in like a general state until our pawn object is actually populated. That just makes sure that you can't access animations that where the source isn't there yet, because the source isn't set until your character is loaded into the world, and then it'll get its animation class information and then set its reference inside here so it can access the class with the animations. That's just how I have it set up for right now. Everything seems to be working pretty fine with it, and I'm just happy that I don't have to reprogram these animations anymore, and I can just share them between other actors, enemies, and other things in general, and have them operate pretty much the same with kind of tweak logic if I want to, but that'll be mostly in the animations and not necessarily the states. Where am I? See, I had a bullet list on what I was supposed to talk to and not ramble, and here I am rambling. I think I pretty much covered all of that. these are the blueprints that I'm using in an animation graph or a notify graph to be able to do certain things. So this comes in and checks. This comes in and checks the input buffer to see what's on the front palette of the actual attack buffer. And then if there is something there, then we can go and check our next attack. So if our combo is not complete, the first thing I do is scan through the input buffer to make sure that anything that's expired in the buffer window, I clear those out and then go and see what the next input is for the input buffer. So as you press buttons in the input buffer, it will stack all those into a pretty much just a T array with a timestamp of when I actually inserted that into the input buffer. So if for some reason I say that, I think right now I have the input buffer expiring after 250 milliseconds. So after that, that input would be invalid, and then the next one will become the valid one. So that way you can control how much cached inputs you want and how little you want. Because if it's too big, then your input buffer can get pretty full, and then you'll see yourself stop attacking. Well, you'll stop pressing the attack button, but because you have so much in your buffer, your character would continuously to attack, which is not what you're currently doing. So that way, the input buffer only covers the gap of input that is needed for the little animation cuts and frames that you need to be able to execute the next combo. So if that makes any sense to anyone. I'm not very well at speaking on a normal term, so hopefully some other people can understand what I'm trying to say. So pretty much I clear the expired combos, the expired inputs. I go and look at what kind of group I have. And by group right now I have it to where it'll split off if it's a single input, which is just, going down your heavier lights, or a combo mash, which is heavy and light pressed together, which I will use eventually to execute my specials. And that's what the other side of the if statement is going to be for handling that. Right here I do a stamina check to see if we can actually do a move. If not, then we don't do anything. But if we do have enough stamina to be able to do a move, then we can come in here. I check the input and match that up to something in the combo list. I get that combo out and check the requirements, because I want to have the ability to be able to do things on the ground only or in the air only. So it just checks that to make sure that we match the requirements for the move type. And then we come in here, we get the move. Right now I only use the animation, but we would normally check in here to see if it's an animation, spell ID, or skill ID. And as I show right here, it's a to-do to try to expand this a little bit and try to see if I can have a priority system to see if the animation will override the special ID or skill ID, depending on what I have in there and what order I want to check things in. And this is what I was talking about right here for the the soft lock. So if I'm leaning the controller in a certain direction, it's going to detect that I'm trying to do a manual direction requirement for the next soft lock or lock check. And inside of here, if I'm locked on, then we're gonna look towards the enemy. But if I'm doing a soft lock, then I'm going to try to look at the direction that I am actually facing. I'm gonna get the scanned monster list from my captured monster list array, and then I'm going to do a cone check to make sure that since I am requiring a direction for my targets, then I only cone off that area of attack where I'm looking currently. So that way, even if there's nothing there, at least it's going to try to find an enemy within your wanted and desired area of attack, instead of like those other games that automatically soft lock to everything around you and never let you attack something that you're trying to turn towards, because it's already soft locked on a target that's already closer than the way that you're trying to do. So that eliminates that frustration to me in general as a gamer, to be able to tell the soft lock which way I want to go. And then within that soft lock area, it just finds the closest target and sets that as my soft lock target. And then I turn towards the lock target here. So that way I'm making sure that I'm facing the direction of that lock target. Then it removes the last input that I'm processing from the input buffer, and then continues or starts the combo list. One of the other ones I have here, this just ends the combo. Yeah, this is just a general end for the combo, so that way I know that next time I process the input buffer, I'm starting the combo over. You can also have like a delay in here if for some reason you end the combo and you want to have a small little time buffer in between the time that they do the combo and end the combo, that you have a penalty window where they can't start another combo. I've seen some systems that do that before, but with me, I just want to be able to go straight into the next combo because I find it more fun. One thing I might be able to put there is if you get staggered, then if you get staggered by an enemy, that'll probably delay your ability to be able to start your combo because you just got staggered. So the idea is to stagger the enemy before they can stagger you, and then get your attacks off and block so you can't be staggered by another enemy's attack. Or if you see that they're about to hit you with something, switch targets with the soft lock and stagger them before they can stagger you. I kind of just said that, but I think I'm in the rambling phase now, so hopefully I can stop this soon. Here's the hit cone notification. So when I come in here for the hit, I check to see whether I'm an enemy or a hero. And if I'm the hero, then I can get information from this. So right now I have some data inside of my weapon type that tells me how far I can actually slice with my weapon. So right now I just do a check to see whichever one is higher. So if my weapon has a higher length than what I'm trying to put in for my hit radius in the actual notification on the animation track, I can just pick which one there was the highest. And this is where all my parameters come in. I can say, hey, this is the attack type, this is the cone radius, these are whether the attack can be pushed back or not. And then I come in here and apply this damage information to the actual character. Anyone who has my toolkit now know that this function in general was a general mess, and I've seemed to be able to like clean it up and make it more modular to where you can actually read it. And here's also where I had a lot of scans, trying to do multi-radial scans for my actual actors in the field. And even though these says get enemy in line and get scan enemies is actually just a capsule that I have. So area capture collision is what I'm using right now. And if I can find it, find reference. Okay, apparently I can't find reference even though I have it marked here. All right, so the only thing that this capture area, this collision does, this collision is about 3,000 in radius, and I have it clamped on the height, so that way I have a continuous object that I can use to, excuse me, to scan my area. And since the overlaps are cheaper than trying to do a trace, I'm using the overlaps to just get a general collection of everything in my area that I want to be able to find in any kind of data lookup. So I have my AI characters or my trigger zones that I can add to this list, and then use that same data for my radars, use it for any kind of enemy trapping that I need to do. So if I need to see how many enemies are around me, instead of actually doing a scan, I can use this list, which has everything that's in my general vicinity. And this is one of the major changes that sent me from 20 frames per second back up to 60 frames per second for my game. So everything works pretty well with this. Even the overlap begin and the overlap end. So if I move away from enemies, everything's working pretty well with that. I'm trying to see what else I can do and scan with this, but it works pretty well. And even if I have a side character and I switch to them, that's already set up in their base object. So I'll be able to dynamically move back and forth between their list and my list and update the radar based on who I actually control in my party at that current moment. I added an ambush capsule, which is pretty much used to check to see if what I'm hitting is an enemy. And if it is, then I start the ambush check, which just pretty much checks to see if I'm looking at the enemy and I'm ambushing them from behind, then it's going to give me an ambush bonus. And I don't know exactly what I'm going to use for the bonuses right now, but at least it shows, at least I have the ability to be able to set up a preemptive bonus scenario. Trying to think if there's anything else. I have it to where I can make movement sounds now for the enemies to hear me. I think I covered that in the previous one. Scan for interactive objects, which doesn't do a scan anymore. The only thing it does is actually gets the information from my list, and I just do a distance calculation, which is a lot cheaper than trying to do a scan every tick. So I can get a more accurate and faster update for what NPC I'm about to click. And actually, when I had it before, the way I had it before, since I had to delay the scan, I would end up with kind of what they have in Final Fantasy 15, where as soon as you walk up towards an enemy and you hit X, it makes you jump instead of interacting with the object, because it seems like they have a delay in between the time that you get close to an item, close to an NPC, and it registers as an interactable object, to where you hit interaction and instead of interacting, you jump. I had that same thing with this, and now that's fixed. And it feels a lot better. I've also moved the jump button away from interact because of Final Fantasy 15 and how it annoyed me. So I was like, okay, learn from other people's mistakes and just get rid of it. I really think I'm just rambling right now. I think I've covered everything that I've done so far. I'm getting excited about like everything now, since I'm no longer at a brick wall. Oh, I can show the move forward notify, which is just getting my forward vector, my location, and the power, and just multiplying my forward vector by that to do a sweep and move the character forward. That's just general. And I think that's it, really. I have a lot to fix and a lot of little issues like the enemies' icons, well, their battle gauges being stuck on screen. Hopefully I can fix that in the next one. Well, the next video. We'll buy the next video. And eventually I'm trying to get not all of this because obviously I can't put Chameleon, the Chameleon plugin that I'm using for a lot of effects, into my toolkit, but I can at least leave some stubs for whatever post-processing that you want to use. I can leave just like the pseudocode there for you to implement this however you want to. Well, that's another thing I wanted to show real quick, just for people who had questions about it, because I know that I usually get questions about certain mechanics like that. So if I go to my main hero, and let's see, I think it's in base hero. This is just my my main character that's parented to the PC hero to make it compatible with the engine. So if I go to controller, I think it's R1. So, okay, action scan. So in this scan, what happens here is it'll come through, it'll get the Chameleon post-processing event, and I'll enable the depth filter and the clip filter, which is the character highlight and then the character outline that you see around the character when it's enabled. And I also enable the sonar post-processing in it. And then I set the sonar wave as close to me as possible, so that way you don't see it in front of me before it scans out. So it just starts as close as possible for it to be unseen by the end user. I increment to my next phase, and then I set the timer for this. So once you start the state machine, it's going to timer itself and then pretty much do the effect of the scan and the highlight within these next states. So if I go back, in this next state, it's going to increase the sonar waves by a certain amount. And with this, I wanted the wave to only go out about 10,000. I guess it would be meters or centimeters, one of those. I wanted to go out by 10,000 because that's the test range that I did with Chameleon to see that, okay, that's way too far for me to try to even see enemies. So I don't want to scan anything. I don't want to scan and detect anything past that. So now I'm just animating the actual sonar every tick phase by this much. Just doing simple math on how long I want the actual scan to be, divided by, the maximum length. And every time I go through, as long as I'm within that scan area, I take my current scan distance and go through, again, an already acquired list of objects. So the monsters and the NPCs are already on my main character. So there's no reason for me to do a scan. There's no reason for me to do a trace to try to get the enemies around me. That collision capsule has already given me all that information for me to go through. So now I can just go through, get all the scanned enemies around me, just do a simple math test to get the distance. And if I hit one of these objects, I'll go into the actual mesh object and set the custom render depth to true, which will make it show up as it'll enable the post-processing effect for the Chameleon colors. trying to see what it's called right now because I just call it chameleon colors, which means nothing. So if I go down to chameleon, so we got the highlight and the highlight color for both the depth and the highlight color for the, it says highlighter, but it's more like an outline. So if I go in here and just type in custom, if I enable the depth pass and go behind it, since I have this enabled inside of Chameleon, you can see the outline and the other thing for it. So if I go back to Chameleon, I can go down to here and then play with the values. So if I want to turn off the outline, I can. And this is everything that's behind something. And here, if I want to turn off this one, that's when you can actually see the item. You can turn that on and off and just see how it's going to affect. Excuse me. So I do that for monsters and NPCs. I'm also going to do it for treasure chests. Because before on the actual map I had treasure chests visible, but I want to be able to hide stuff in different places and leave it up to the player to actually use the scan feature to go and find hidden stuff that I've tucked away in miscellaneous places. So if they do a scan and say they see a little sparkly something around the corner, they know that something's over there, so they can go look and dig and find something, you know, something of value or a collectible or something. Let's see, that does the scan. The dilate is the portion of the scan where after I've done the initial scan out, it highlights everything, but then I slowly dye the effect of I slowly kill the effect of the scan to be pretty much nothing, so that way it's not always on screen and it's not a screen clutter. It's just to give you a hint of where something is, and then slowly remove that away from your sight so you can go back into the game and be in the game instead of having, you know, Assassin's Creed icons for millions of years on your screen just cluttering everything. And then after that, it resets the state machine and clears the timer, and then gives you the ability to be able to come in here and do another scan. And right now I have it hard coded. It's about 5 seconds. So once you do a scan, after it's scanned everything and it's dimmed everything down, it's on a 5-second cooldown before you can use the scan again. And that's a 5-second cooldown from the time that it finished, not the time that you press the button. In general, I've cleaned up a lot of things and got a lot of performance out. I can't wait to be able to get to the next part, which is actually trying to get the particle effects and things like that for the battles in, so I can see at least a little flashy goodness of kicking enemy's tail. And then I can work on getting the rest of changing the battle interface. I want to go through and be able to make a kind of pseudo menu system to where you can just change the type of menu texture to be able to switch your menu look around, because I've been looking at a lot of different menu types and it just seems like I need ability to be able to put in a template type or a template interface and then never have to touch that code again. Because if I make another game, I don't want to have to play around with trying to make an interface, trying to do this. I just need a generic interface for certain things, and other things I can just make my own custom thing for. So like a list box of buttons, I don't have to put that much thought into it, but my overall item page, I could put more thought into that, where everything else for like, it's like, oh, do you want to sleep at an inn? Go to the inn. Good night. You know, that's the generic template stuff that I would want to put in. But I probably should be asleep now. It's almost 4 o'clock, and I've been talking for too long, and I'm going to pass out now. Peace.